Good morning. This is Beaty-Coffey, the Ministry of Uncover No More. I'm reading from the Brownings, Letters and Poetry. It was compiled by Christopher Ricks. It's an old book that I love and take down occasionally and read. I also have separate works. I have Volume 5, The Complete Works of Robert Browning, from a different publisher, Ohio Baylor, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning is a paperback from Wordsworth, which is much of their poetry. I am at this point reading Aurora Leigh, which is like 9 books, actual books, and I finished book 2, so I'm having to learn with some of the longer works. For instance, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's sonnets from the Portuguese, I believe, or of the Portuguese. After I wrestled with that large one, it's beautiful, but I put too many expectations on myself at times with my work. And I'm learning to space things out a little bit and still appreciate the authors that are recreating my world, since what has happened to me has actually happened to me. And so Aurora Leigh, I'm taking it a little at a time and just published a little bit of artwork that I did for book 2. And some of those books of Aurora Leigh, I'm not going to be able to do artwork for. My life is just completely different than hers, though I do understand what chronic pain works through a journey. I just published on a blog how I know that manhood and womanhood has been lost in this country. And I don't remember, that's on a brand new blog for Emerson and Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. These are men who understand some things that, much like Rudolf Steiner, they understand some things that men of this day and age by and large do not understand, and it is causing problems that I don't want to talk about right now, or maybe perhaps ever again. I'm tired of being betrayed and bullied. I'm tired of my life being stated for me and nobody stops long enough to ask me about their perspective about my life. They would rather walk off and be offended. I'm just tired of that, and so I've become, to a degree, what is called a solitary pagan. I'm staying to myself. My Uncle Paul had to do it. My parents had to do it to a degree. We're just targeted, used, and thrown away. Dad and Uncle Paul had careers. Mom and I didn't. So there's a certain amount of importance in humanity if you have the career to pay the bills. There is no importance in humanity for someone like me, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And yet, I'm about to read something, and when I show up to like Austin Pets Alive, there's a community there that is pure gold. So that's all I'm going to say about that, because I don't want to denigrate anyone. I don't want to be a part of what's going on in this society. I don't want that in my life anymore. I have changed in a beautiful way, and that's where I want to stay. This is Elizabeth Barrett Browning to Robert Browning. Sunday, September 6th, 1846. Not well, not well, but I shall see you with my own eyes soon after you read what I write today, so I shall not write much. Only a few words to tell you that Flush is found and lying on the sofa with one paw and both ears hanging over the edge of it. Still, my visit to Taylor was not the successful one. My hero was not at home. I went, you know, did I tell you, with Wilson in the cab. We got into obscure streets, and our cabman stopped at a public house to ask his way. Out came 2 or 3 men. Oh, you want to find Mr. Taylor, I dare say. Mark that no name had been mentioned, and instantly an unsolicited philanthropist ran before us to the house, and out again to tell me that the great man wasn't at home. But wouldn't I get out? Wilson, in an aside of terror, entreated me not to think of such a thing. She believed devoutly in the robbing and murdering, and was not reassured by the gang of benevolent men and boys who, quote-unquote, lived but to oblige us, all around the cab. Then wouldn't I see Mrs. Taylor, suggested the philanthropist, and notwithstanding my negatives, he had run back again and brought an immense feminine bandit, fat enough to have had an easy conscience all her life, who informed me that her husband might be in a few minutes, or in so many hours. Wouldn't I like to get out and wait? Wilson pulling at my gown, the philanthropist echoing the invitation of the feminine Taylor. No, I thanked them all. It was not necessary that I should get out, but it was that Mr. Taylor should keep his promise about the restoration of a dog, which he had agreed to restore, and I begged her to induce him to go to Wimpole Street in the course of the day, and not defer it any longer. To which replied the lady with the most gracious of smiles, oh yes, certainly. And indeed she did believe that Taylor had left home precisely on that business, poising her head to the right and left with the most easy grace. She was sure that Taylor would give his very best attention. So in the midst of the politeness, we drove away, and Wilson seemed to be of opinion that we had escaped with our lives barely. Plain enough it was that the gang was strong there. The society, the fancy, quote-unquote, had their roots in the ground. The faces of those men. And then she goes on to say that Mr. Taylor actually did come by with the dog. But instead of the okay, so let me finish. I'm going to come down. Dirty he is, and much thinner, and continually he is drinking. 6 guineas was his ransom, and now I've paid 20 for him to the dog stealers. I stole our dog and starved it, mistreated it. So I'm against puppy mills. Now I'm going to read her poem. No, I'm actually not. I'm going to read a portion of To Flush My Dog by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I will read you my notes. On January 25th, 2022, I wrote for Gidget, Tangi, Coley, Sam, Sammy, Valentine, and Dusty. Those have been some of our faithful dogs. And then on the 18th of 2022, so this was a little before, our sweet pets love us in that devoted way. May we learn their grace. Certainly, this quality is very healing continually. I'm going to read verses 6, 7, and 8 because I made a great incense candle pot in this beautiful incense smoke coming out. Yet, my pretty sportive friend, little is't to such an end, that I promise thy rareness, that I praise thy rareness. Other dogs may be the peers, haply in these drooping ears, and this glossy fairness. Verse 7. But of thee it shall be said, this dog watched beside a bed, day and night unweary, watched within a curtained room, where no sunbeam break the gloom, round the sick and dreary. Verse 8. Roses gathered for a vase, in that chamber died apace, beam and breeze resigning, this dog only waited on, knowing that when light is gone, love remains for shining. She was an invalid and lived a very closed life. And people do things like that. People also lose their identities like I have. And we lived a very closed, quiet life. I have 2 cats. You've heard them flitting around. This is Beaty-Coffey of the Ministry of Uncovering No More.